Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh and in this video we are going to have a look at few more Microsoft Excel features that are needed for the ERP consultants as the bare minimum Excel skills. Now, so far in this series of videos on Microsoft Excel, we have seen all of these features. Like we have seen 6 features so far. In our first video in this series, we saw these two features, which are find and replace and sort and filter. So if you have not watched that video, I'm giving the link of that video over here, so you can go and watch that video first. In the second video in this series, we covered these 3 features, which are paste spatial, then data validation, and then remove duplicate and conditional formatting. So all these 3 features we covered in our second video in the series of Microsoft Excel. Again, I'm giving the link over here, so you can go and watch that video if not already watched. And in the third video, we have covered some of the basic Excel formulas. For example, sum, average, if, trim, upper, lower, proper, and concatenate. These are very basic formulas that might be needed for you to be able to use the Microsoft Excel effectively. Again, if you have not seen this third video, then again I'm giving the link over here. You can go and watch that third video and then come back and watch this fourth video in the series of Microsoft Excel skills that are needed for the ERP consultants. So with that, let's begin. Now in this video, I'm going to cover these two features primarily. One feature is called text to columns and another feature is called VLOOKUP, which I believe like anybody who have heard about Microsoft Excel would be knowing what VLOOKUP is. So these two features we'll be covering in today's session. So for that, first of all, let's move to this particular sheet called text to column. So I have made this worksheet. Now you guys are all aware about what data we were talking about for all of our previous features that we have seen in this Microsoft Excel series. So the data set was around the trainees' scores in a particular test. However, for the text to column feature demonstration, I'm not actually going back to that data set. Rather, I'm covering some other use case. Now, many a times what happens is you will have the requirement to download the data or to copy the data from some web portal or from some other document or from some other place to the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Let's take one case wherein I have this particular website called Investopedia, and on this I have got this one article called biggest companies in the world by market cap. And what I want to do is I want to copy down this information and I want to actually crunch or let's say analyze that information in Microsoft Excel. So in order to copy down that, what I do is let's say I copy this particular data, let's assume. So I press Ctrl C and then I go to Microsoft Excel and press Ctrl V. So I just adjusted the width of column and the height of the rows. And now in this data, let's assume that what I want to do is I want to separate the headings that are there from the data points that are there. So for example, in my first cell, I have revenue TTM as the heading and then 378.3 billion is the data. So I want to separate both of these things. And that is the use case where you can use text to column. Now, how to use that? It's pretty simple. So let's say I want to convert text to column for this particular data. So I just need to select that data. I can select that entire column also. And then within data, I have got this text to column over here within the data tools section. So let me click on that text to column. Now here are two ways or two approaches how you can convert your data from text to column. The first way is called delimited. What do you mean by that? It is something like suppose that in your data you have one character that is used as a separator. Then you can rather use that character and tell the Excel that wherever you find this particular character in my data string or in my text string, you just separate the text at that particular point. That is something that's called delimited. And another approach is fixed width. For example, if I want to try this fixed width in this particular data set, I may not be able to do that because if I click next, then it will simply give me the scale and I will need to draw the vertical line where I need to split this particular data. So if I draw two lines over here, what it will do is it will create or it will convert this data into 3 columns. So it will create 3 columns. It will convert this data into 3 columns. But in this particular set of data, what I have is the length and the characters that are involved in per line are not same. And that is where this is not something that I can use at the moment, but I can very well use the delimited approach. Why? Because if you observe my data closely, then you can understand or you can observe that my headers are separated from the data by this particular sign called colon, right? And that is where I can use the colon as the delimiter to convert my data from text to column. So let's do that. Let's click on next. And here it will ask me that what exact delimiter I want to use. So it gives certain default delimiters like tab, semicolon, comma, space, and so on. But I can specify some other delimiter also. And what I want to specify is the colon as the delimiter. So as soon as I specify that delimiter, it has systematically divided my data into two columns using the colon as the delimiter, or the colon as that point where the data needs to be separated in two columns. So let me click next with that and then simply click finish. That's it. This is how you basically use the text to column feature. Now, obviously, this by itself will not make my data completely usable, right? I will still need to remove certain impurities. Like if I want to remove those billion, trillion words, or maybe that NASDAQ, or maybe the percentage sign, or maybe I want to format some numbers. So there would be some sort of other data operations that might be needed, but this is the beginning point. So if you have huge data that is characterized by either some sort of delimiter or it has got some pattern, which is like in terms of width or in terms of the character length, it is quite similar. All the rows in the data are quite similar. In both of these use cases, you can use this text to column as a start to analyze your data. Now, let's move back to index. And the second feature that we want to cover in this video is VLOOKUP. So for VLOOKUP demonstration, I'm again going to go back to my previous data set, wherein I have got certain trainees. And so far, if you remember the sheets that we have used in our previous videos, for example, there was this particular sheet, right? So in this sheet, what we said was like we had the data for trainee 1 to 15, and then we had their scores, correct? That was the data that we were using basically. But in all of those sheets, as you can see, what I had common was my trainees did not have the names, right? So all of my trainees were identified as trainee 1, trainee 2, trainee 3, and so on and so forth. But in reality, they have the names, right? Now, why are those names not included in my data so far? It may be because like I wanted to have some sort of confidentiality, right? So whoever I wanted to give this data to analyze, I did not want to reveal the student names. But now at the end of it, I personally need to know what exactly is the student name and who has secured how much of the total score. And for that, what I have is I have a mapping with me, which is like which trainee or which particular person is identified by which trainee code name or which trainee number, right? So I have that mapping, and that mapping looks something like this. So I have got these 15 trainees, and all of these 15 trainees have now names, and those were identified with the trainee code in the original data. And what I want to have is the total score against each of this identified trainee. Now, if you observe this data closely, it's not in the similar sequence or the similar order how the data was there in my previous sheets, wherein I had the data in order like trainee 1 to trainee 15, maybe because I had got the data sorted in that order or so on and so forth. But now what I have is like I have this data maybe in order of alphabetical sequence, but then this data is not in order. And that is where I cannot simply copy down this particular total sum column over here. And that is where you use the VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP is the formula, or VLOOKUP is the feature whereby you can refer to some other cell or refer to some other data set and get the value that is a corresponding value around your original reference cell. How exactly that needs to be done? It's quite simple. VLOOKUP is also a formula. It can be defined in an Excel cell, same as some other formulas that we have seen in our previous videos. So you need to write is equal to and then VLOOKUP and then open the bracket. Now let's understand what is the syntax of this particular formula. So the syntax is, first of all, you need to enter the lookup values. So for me, what are the lookup values? Are they name or are they code names in this sheet? Obviously, they are the code names, because what I want to look up in my different data set to get the scores in front of a particular trainee are the trainee code names, right? The trainee names are something that's a unique data that is over here just in this sheet, but it was not there in my previous sheets. But what was there in my previous sheets is the trainee code name, and that is where that becomes my lookup value. Then comma, then table array. So table array as in like from which particular table or from which particular data set I want to get this particular score value in this particular table. So what I can do is I can simply move to a different sheet, and in that I can select a table without moving the cursor or without moving, let's say, so if you see in this cell, so it is still inside my formula, but I have just selected a table array. And how I have selected it? Column A to column F. Now one thing that needs to be remember always is whatever you have selected as a lookup value over here, in your table array, that lookup values column should always be first column. Otherwise, it won't work, right? So that's where I have selected the first column as column A, which is my code name in my next data set. And then I have selected up to column F because what I ideally want to get against the trainee name into that particular sheet is the total or the sum total, correct? So I have selected my table array accordingly. Now let's see what's next. So if I click over here and if I give the comma, it will tell me what I need to enter next, which is something called column index number. So column index number is nothing but the sequence of the column from which I want to get the data as compared to the first column in my table array. For example, here I want to have the total sum in my resultant data set. And this total column is at what sequence from my original column in this data or from my first column in this data. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? So it's a sixth column from the first or from the beginning in my table array. So I just need to enter 6 over here. And then the last thing that I need to enter is the range lookup if it is false. So true is more or less like it is going to be captured based on my lookup value. But what if it is false? Then what I need to enter? I can simply say that it is false. And then I close the bracket and enter, right? There you go. So what I have got is in front of trainee 4, what's my data or what's my score that I have got? It is the score 2. So if I get back to my original columns or original data set, then I can see that for trainee 4, it's actually 2, right? Total sum is actually 2. So that's how you can use the VLOOKUP formula. But that's not it. Like if I copy this as it is and I paste it in all of these cells, will it work? Ideally not. Why? Because suppose if I copy this and paste it over here in this particular cell, then let's see what has happened. So over here, my table array was selected as A1 to F16, right? A1 to F16. So coming back to my original data set, A1 was this cell and F16 was this cell, correct? So that was my table array that was selected. But if I copy down that same formula to my second row, then what's the table array that is selected? It is A2 to F17. So what it means is it keeps on progressing that table array. So similarly, if I copy down this data in all my next cells, what's going to happen is in my last cell, the table array that I have is A15 to F30. What is that table? A15 to F30. A15 to F30 is this table, right? Which is not correct because every time what I want that formula to look into is this very table area, correct? This very table area. And I do not want to progress it like this and then this and then this and so on, correct? So that's where what I need to do is I need to specify the table array as the fixed table array. And how do I do that? By using the dollar sign. So I can simply, so there is a shortcut key for this. I can simply press F4 key by keeping my cursor over here. And as soon as I do that, what it did was it created a dollar sign or it entered a dollar sign automatically against the column number, and against the row number. So this dollar sign is for column number, this dollar sign is for row number. So it simply entered that dollar sign automatically. Same thing I want to do for my to range also. So I'll again press F4 by keeping the cursor over here. And then it has got my table array now as $A1, or rather $A $1 to $F $16, right? That's it. Now I want obviously my lookup code to progress, correct? So I do not want in each of these columns or in each of these cells also my lookup row or the lookup reference cell should always be B2. I do not want that, right? I want that in this cell it should be B3, in this cell it should be B4, and so on and so forth, correct? So that's where I do not need to put the dollar sign over here, or I do not need to put the dollar sign over here, correct? Only dollar sign I need to put is in my table array because I want that to be fixed. And now once I do this and I press enter, and now if I copy this same data in all my cells, now you can see that in my last row or in my last cells also, so table array which has been selected over here is still A1 to F16. It has not progressed as it was progressing earlier. So this is how you can deal with the VLOOKUP formulas copy pasting. Like in one cell, you get the VLOOKUP formula or you build the VLOOKUP formula. And then when you want to copy paste it in the other cells in that same column, you have to do this particular dollar sign exercise before actually copy pasting that particular formula. Now, even after doing that in some cells, you can still observe that my value is not coming properly. It is still coming as hash and then not applicable. Why is it coming that way? Let's find out. So I have my lookup cell as trainee2, but the data set from which I have got this particular data, just look at what exact value I have in that particular cell. And here, if you remember, in our earlier session, we had seen this one particular formula called trim, and I had mentioned you the importance of that trim formula. So the importance was that if at all in your source data, if you have any leading space, which is over here, or if there is any mid space, which is over here, like which is an unwanted or extra mid space, or if there is any trailing space, then in that case, what's going to happen? It is not going to match my particular data, right? And that's where if I do it this way, that suppose that if I remove my leading cell or leading space over here, and similarly in this particular case, if I remove my unwanted trailing space, and if I go back to my VLOOKUP sheet, then you can see that for both of these, like there were two impurities over here and it simply corrected those impurities. But this trainee1 impurity is still there, and because of which my trainee1's VLOOKUP value is not able to be fetched correctly. So again, if I go to this basic formula, I had the trailing space over here. So I need to remove that trailing space also. And if I go back to my VLOOKUP formula, now you can see that all the values are fetched properly by my VLOOKUP formula. So in this video, we have seen two features. One is text to column, another one is VLOOKUP. So both of them are very, very important feature when it comes to analyzing the data or analyzing the large set of data, which is often a need in your day-to-day job as an ERP consultant. The remaining feature, which are pivot table and the formatting discipline, is something that we will cover in our next video, which will also be the last video in our series of Microsoft Excel videos for ERP consultants. That's it for today. Thank you everyone for watching this video. With the advent of cloud, the ERP solutions are becoming more and more affordable. And that's where even the small and mid-scale organizations are increasingly opting for ERP softwares. What it means for us is ERP consulting as a career option is now more lucrative than ever. So if you are a fresher finance, commerce and management graduate and want to build your career in the ERP consulting industry, then go visit www.yourerpcoach.com and hit that inquire button right now.